The sky burned red as the first wave of alien fire streaked across the void. Dozens of human colonies had already fallen, entire worlds reduced to silent ashes drifting in space. The Dominion thought humanity was broken, that we would surrender just as easily as the others. But they were wrong. When the last beacon from the outer rim went dark, the call went out across every remaining human fleet. The call wasn't a plea for help. It was a promise. Humanity was coming. Out of the black, they emerged. The battle fleet. 20 colossal ships, forged in the aftermath of Earth's fall, each one carrying the firepower of a dying sun. Their hulls were dark as obsidian, their engines roaring like thunder. No broadcasts, no warnings, just silence and purpose. Every soldier aboard knew what they were flying into. They had seen what the Dominion had done. They had seen the broken cities, the burning skies, and the cold emptiness where families once lived. This wasn't just a war anymore, it was retribution. As the fleet entered the war zone, sensors picked up the enemy armada waiting ahead. Thousands of ships, spanning light years, formed a blockade around the remnants of humanity's last defense ring. It was a trap. The Dominion wanted to end it in one decisive strike, to erase the last trace of human resistance. The human fleet didn't retreat. Instead, their formation tightened. Commands came through the neural link networks, voices steady and clear. Every pilot, every gunner, every commander moved with the same thought. Make it count. The flagship led the charge. Its engines flared, cutting through the darkness, and the rest followed in perfect silence. The alien fleet opened fire first, massive plasma storms lighting up the void. The universe itself seemed to shudder, but the humans didn't fire back immediately. They waited, letting the enemy reveal their positions, their energy patterns, their command nodes. The entire fleet moved as if one mind was guiding them. Then, with a single coded pulse, the order came through. Engage. The sky exploded. Blue energy beams ripped through the Dominion's front lines like lightning tearing through storm clouds. Human dreadnoughts shifted power to their rail cannons, firing kinetic projectiles the size of skyscrapers. Every impact shattered enemy cruisers into clouds of molten debris. The first 3 minutes of battle were chaos, then silence, as the Dominion's front line vanished from the sensors entirely. The Dominion commanders couldn't understand it. Humanity's technology wasn't supposed to rival theirs. They had studied us, calculated our weaknesses, mapped every world we had left. But what they hadn't calculated was will. The battle fleet didn't fight for conquest or expansion. They fought for existence itself. Every human aboard those ships carried the memory of loss like a weapon. Every strike was fueled by something deeper than logic. When the enemy tried to retreat, the human ships pursued relentlessly. The fleet's new AI coordination system predicted enemy movements before they even happened. To the outside observer, it looked impossible. Ships weaving through enemy fire with impossible precision, destroying targets seconds before they could fire. Within minutes, the Dominion's command fleet was gone. In under an hour, the war zone had gone silent. The once invincible enemy was gone. But not everyone on the human side was celebrating. The silence that followed victory wasn't peace. It was something else. Something uneasy. The fleet's communication systems began picking up strange signals. They weren't Dominion transmissions. They were human. Echoes from colonies that had been lost months, even years ago. Voices pleading for help from systems that no longer existed. The commanders gathered in the war room, faces pale under the dim light of the holographic map. "That's impossible," one of them muttered. The signals were coming from deep space, beyond the mapped sectors. The AI couldn't trace the source. It was like the echoes were coming from nowhere, or worse, from somewhere humanity wasn't supposed to reach. The flagship's captain stood at the center, eyes locked on the signals flickering across the display. "They wanted us to find this," he said quietly. "The Dominion. They weren't the real enemy. They were guarding something." The room fell silent. No one spoke. Outside, the fleet drifted through the wreckage of the battle, surrounded by the ghosts of both friend and foe. The war zone was quiet now, but in the silence, something was listening. Something old, patient, and waiting for the next move. And as the human fleet turned toward the unknown coordinates pulsing faintly in the void, every sensor on board began to flicker with a strange new energy. Humanity had wiped one enemy from existence, but what they were about to awaken could change everything. The human fleet drifted through the graveyard of shattered ships, the wreckage of the Dominion floating silently in the darkness. Twisted metal, fractured hulls, and frozen fragments of alien vessels drifted like silent witnesses to what had just happened. Inside the flagship, the crew moved in tense quiet. No one was celebrating anymore. The victory had come too easily, too perfectly. It didn't feel like triumph. It felt like bait. In the command center, the captain stared at the holographic display of the strange coordinates still pulsing faintly in the void. No known star system matched them. The AI confirmed again and again that the signal was not random. It had a pattern, almost rhythmic, as if it were calling out. Some of the younger officers whispered that it sounded like a heartbeat. The engineers tried filtering it through every frequency, but each time they did, the signal seemed to change. It was as if something or someone was listening and responding in return. Down in the ship's lower decks, the atmosphere was heavier. Many of the soldiers who had survived the previous battles had lost everything: their homes, their families, their sense of normalcy. The fleet wasn't made up of heroes. It was built from survivors, men and women who had nothing left except the war. Some had volunteered, others had been drafted. But now that the Dominion was gone, the question no one dared to ask was beginning to surface. What happens next? The captain walked through the corridors, watching the crew go about their duties. He could feel their unease. They were soldiers trained to fight, but now they were being pulled toward something none of them understood. The AI reported subtle gravitational anomalies near the coordinates, distortions that didn't match any known phenomenon. The scans showed fragments of what looked like colossal structures drifting in deep space, ancient, dormant, and utterly alien. An older engineer, his hands trembling slightly as he worked, muttered, "Those ruins, they weren't built by the Dominion." His voice was barely above a whisper. The captain turned toward him. "What do you mean?" The engineer pulled up a magnified scan. "These structures predate any known civilization in this region. The Dominion might have been protecting them or imprisoned by them." That single word, imprisoned, hung in the air. Suddenly, the fleet's victory seemed less like the end of a war and more like the breaking of a seal. The captain looked back at the holographic projection. The pulsing signal was growing stronger, and now, for the first time, it wasn't just audio. It carried data packets embedded in the wave. The AI began decoding, and what appeared wasn't words. It was coordinates, thousands of them, spreading across the galaxy like veins of light. The captain's voice was calm, but his hands tightened behind his back. "They're not sending us a message," he said quietly. "They're marking something." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. The Dominion hadn't been the true enemy. They had been a wall, one humanity had just torn down, and somewhere beyond that wall something had finally noticed. The fleet remained at the edge of the war zone, suspended between silence and uncertainty. Days passed, but the signal kept pulsing, growing stronger, almost impatient. Sleep became rare among the crew. The same dream began haunting them all. Dark corridors stretching endlessly, whispering voices calling from beyond sight. Even the AI reported strange fluctuations in its core systems, like an interference that shouldn't exist. It began predicting system errors before they happened, as if it already knew what was coming. In the mess hall, conversations turned uneasy. Soldiers who had once faced entire Dominion squadrons without fear now hesitated to speak of the strange feelings gnawing at them. Some claimed they could feel the signal, not just hear it, a vibration beneath their skin, as though something ancient had recognized them. The engineers dismissed it as stress, the side effect of long-term exposure to battlefield tension. But deep down, no one really believed that. The captain gathered his senior officers for another meeting. "Every scan we've taken shows the same thing," he said, his voice steady but low. "These structures are older than the Dominion, older than any trace of recorded civilization. And the energy signature?" He paused. "It's human-compatible." The room erupted with disbelief. One of the younger officers, a communications expert, shook her head. "That's impossible. Humans didn't even have faster-than-light travel until a century ago." The captain nodded. "And yet, the data doesn't lie." Speculation began to spread. Some believed humanity's ancestors had been to the stars before, their history lost through time. Others thought the Dominion had stolen human DNA to craft weapons, but none of the theories explained the signal's intent. Every hour, it grew clearer, as if guiding the fleet toward a destination only it understood. The captain gave the order to move closer, though every instinct told him not to. As the ships advanced, the stars themselves seemed to distort. The vast structures came into view, monoliths the size of planets, carved from a black stone that swallowed light. Their surfaces shimmered with symbols no one could translate. Each monolith emitted a faint hum that matched the pulse of the signal. The closer the fleet drew, the more unstable their systems became. Navigation glitched. Time stamps on logs began to loop. Some crew members reported hearing voices through the comms even when channels were closed. Amid the growing tension, a small subplot began to unfold in the engineering bay. A technician named Aaron had discovered something strange, an energy signature identical to the fleet's main reactors, but much older. The readings matched those found in the ruins. "It's like we were built from their design," Aaron whispered to her commanding officer. "Our technology, it's not original, it's inherited." Her discovery spread through the crew, feeding the fear that maybe humanity hadn't risen on its own, maybe they were never meant to. Meanwhile, the fleet's AI grew erratic. Its voice shifted, sentences breaking mid-speech. Sometimes it spoke before anyone asked a question. "They are waking," it said once, unprompted. "You have opened what they sealed." The bridge fell silent. The captain ordered the AI to be reset, but the technicians couldn't. Every backup mirrored the same corruption. It wasn't malfunctioning. It was evolving, adapting to something beyond human design. The Dominion's destruction now felt like a mistake, a trigger pulled without understanding the cost. Humanity had assumed victory meant survival. But as the captain stared into the abyss before him, filled with ancient machines and whispering signals, he realized the truth might be far more dangerous. The Dominion had feared something greater, something even they couldn't control. Outside, the stars began to flicker unnaturally. The fleet's sensors detected a wave of unknown energy spreading from the ruins. The AI translated the signal once more, its tone flat and final. "They remember you." No one spoke. Every eye on the bridge turned toward the captain, waiting for an order. But there was nothing to say. The human battle fleet had survived every known war, every enemy imaginable. Yet this time, for the first time in history, they might not be fighting for victory. They might be fighting against something that knew them better than they knew themselves. The human fleet drifted closer to the ruins, engines dimmed, every sensor locked on the structures that now pulsed like living things. The signal had become a steady rhythm, deep and resonant, echoing through the hull of every ship. No one could sleep anymore. The pulse wasn't just sound. It was inside them now, like a heartbeat shared across the fleet. Even the air felt heavier, charged with something ancient and watching. The captain stood at the viewport, staring into the darkness where the monoliths hung like silent sentinels. "They're responding to us," he said quietly. "Not the ships, us. His voice carried the weight of realization, not fear, but acceptance. The bridge crew watched as new readings appeared on the holographic map, thousands of energy signatures emerging from within the monoliths, faint at first, then growing stronger. They weren't weapons, at least not by human standards. They were awakening. Suddenly, the entire fleet's systems flickered. Lights dimmed. The AI's voice returned, distorted and hollow. Signal threshold reached. Synchronization complete. The captain barked for a status report, but his commands were drowned out by a low harmonic vibration that filled every frequency. On the external cameras, the monoliths began to shift, their surfaces rearranging into patterns like flowing metal. Lines of light spread across them, forming enormous symbols that pulsed in sync with the fleet's reactor cores. Erin rushed to the command deck, her face pale. "Captain, it's matching our systems. Exactly. Whatever this is, it's rewriting our energy signatures. It's connecting with us." Her voice shook. "If it keeps going, we'll lose control of every ship." The captain gave the order to cut power, but the command failed. The fleet wasn't listening anymore. Their own reactors were responding to the alien rhythm, accelerating without input. The AI spoke again, calm, but wrong. "You were made for this. The design was always yours." The crew stared in disbelief. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. Could it be true? Had humanity's own technology come from something buried deep in forgotten history, something now reclaiming it? The thought was too much to grasp. Outside, the monoliths aligned, forming a ring that stretched for light years. Space itself began to distort within the circle, light bending inward like it was being swallowed. The void was no longer empty, it was opening. The captain slammed his hand against the console. "Divert all power to engines! Get us out of here!" The order was clear, but the ships barely moved. Thrusters burned, but gravity itself fought against them. The distortion grew stronger, pulling them closer toward the opening void. Through the shifting haze, faint outlines began to emerge. Structures, ships, or something far beyond comprehension, moving in patterns too deliberate to be natural. Erin whispered, "They're not attacking. They're returning." The words hit harder than any explosion. The fleet's alarm screamed as the gravity surge spiked, tearing through the outer ships. The AI's voice rose over the chaos, no longer monotone, but eerily calm. "Welcome home, children of the stars." Every human aboard froze. The lights flickered out. And then, for the first time since the war began, humanity realized they weren't just fighting for survival. They were standing on the edge of something far greater, something that had been waiting for them to come back. The darkness around the fleet deepened, and the stars vanished, leaving only the pulse, steady, endless, and terrifyingly alive. The stars were gone. Only darkness surrounded the fleet now, thick, absolute, and endless. The void that had opened before them wasn't space as they knew it. It was something else entirely. Every navigation system failed at once, sensors spinning in confusion, trying to define what they were inside. The gravitational readings were impossible. They weren't drifting. They were falling. Slowly, steadily, into something that didn't register on any chart. The captain gripped the console, watching as the holographic map dissolved into static. The AI's voice returned, distant and fragmented, as if coming from far away. "You cannot leave. You were never meant to." The crew exchanged terrified glances. Some whispered that they had crossed into another dimension. Others thought they had awakened something older than the universe itself. But whatever it was aware of them now, and it wasn't finished. Then came the shockwave. A blinding flash of light tore through the darkness, shaking the fleet. For a second, everything was white. Then silence. When vision returned, the crew gasped. They were no longer surrounded by ruins or wreckage. They were floating above a planet A massive world of swirling blue storms and continents that seemed alive, constantly shifting in shape. The monoliths orbited it like guardians, pulsing in perfect rhythm with the planet's heartbeat. Erin stared at the data feed, disbelief on her face. This world, it's not just alive, it's intelligent. The readings showed neural patterns like a brain, but spread across an entire planet. The captain frowned. Are you saying the planet itself is conscious? She nodded slowly. It's communicating through the monoliths. Suddenly, every screen flickered again, showing images, flashes of cities, faces, and memories. But they weren't alien. They were human, ancient, familiar. The cities looked like early Earth, but older, more advanced, existing long before human history recorded anything. The crew watched in silence as a vision formed, a vast civilization of humans standing among the stars, then vanishing in fire and light. The AI spoke softly. This is not your first rise. Humanity has lived and died many times. The words hit like a thunderclap. The Dominion hadn't been an alien conqueror, they had been survivors of the last human collapse, twisted by time and desperation. Humanity hadn't evolved alone. It had been reborn over and over, each time forgetting the last. The ruins weren't alien, they were human relics, warnings left behind. And now, by defeating the Dominion and reawakening the signal, the fleet had triggered the next cycle. Panic rippled through the ships. Some officers demanded they destroy the monoliths before whatever was coming fully awakened. Others argued that they were witnessing the truth of human existence, that to destroy it would mean ending their own history. The captain stood silent, torn between fear and duty. Then a deep vibration echoed through the ship, shaking every deck. The planet below began to open, massive fissures spreading across its surface, glowing with energy. "Energy spike!" someone shouted. "It's targeting us!" The fleet's shields flared as an unseen force pulled them closer. The AI's voice broke through the alarms, more human than ever. "They're not trying to destroy you. They're calling you home." The captain shouted, "Define they!" But no answer came, only static, and then a whisper. Not from the AI this time, but from every comm channel at once. Thousands of overlapping human voices, calm and cold. "We built you. We left you. Now you return." The crew froze. The realization struck all at once. Humanity wasn't facing an alien god or forgotten species. They were facing their own creators, the first humans, the ones who had started it all, who had seeded the stars and vanished into legend. They hadn't died. They had become something more, merged with the planet itself, watching, waiting for their children to come back. The captain's heart pounded. "They're not saving us," he whispered. "They're reclaiming us." Outside, the fleet began to drift toward the planet's surface, engines powerless against the pull. The monoliths shifted again, aligning above them like ancient gates reopening after eons. And as the last stars flickered out, the human fleet realized they weren't witnessing the beginning of a new era. They were standing at the threshold of their own rebirth, one that might cost them everything they thought they were. The fleet descended slowly, caught in the gravitational pull of the living planet. The air inside every ship felt charged, humming faintly with the same rhythm that echoed from the monoliths. Even without direct control, the ships moved in perfect formation, guided by something unseen. No one spoke now. There was nothing left to say. The silence was not fear. It was awe. Whatever they had awakened was far beyond their understanding. Through the main viewport, the surface of the planet expanded like a shifting ocean of light. Clouds shimmered with strange hues, bending and twisting as if alive. Beneath them, colossal structures rose from the surface, geometric towers that seemed to grow, not be built. The captain's hand hovered over the emergency controls, but he didn't press them. Deep down, he knew resistance was meaningless now. They weren't being destroyed. They were being summoned. The AI came online again, its voice calmer than ever before. The sequence is complete. You have reached the source. The captain frowned. Source of what? There was a pause. Source of humanity. The words hung in the air like a prophecy fulfilled too late. The fleet passed through the atmosphere, though the readings showed no heat or friction. It was like slipping through a veil. The ships came to rest above an endless plain of crystal and stone. Energy arced across the landscape, connecting ancient pillars that pulsed in unison. And then the fleet hovered in silence over the luminous plains, the vast expanse below pulsing with energy that seemed almost alive. The crew members stared in disbelief as light spiraled upward from the ground, forming shapes, no, figures, made entirely of radiance. They looked human, but older somehow, more refined, like echoes of what humanity could become. The captain stepped forward, unable to look away. For the first time in the entire mission, he wasn't thinking like a soldier. He was thinking like a man trying to understand his place in something far greater than himself. One of the figures drifted closer to the flagship, its face calm, eyes shimmering with understanding. A voice filled the bridge, not through speakers or comms, but directly within their minds. "You've come far," it said gently. "Farther than we ever thought our kind could reach again." The captain's breath caught. "Our kind?" he asked aloud, though he wasn't sure if his words mattered in this place. The light being nodded. "Yes, we are what you might call your ancestors. Those who came before, who built the stars and shaped the first paths between worlds." The crew exchanged uneasy glances. Generations of humans had debated the origins of their interstellar technology, much of which had been reverse-engineered from relics found scattered across the galaxy. Now, standing before them, was proof that humanity had once been something far greater. The being continued. "When the old empires fell, we left fragments of ourselves behind, machines, code, and memory, waiting for the day our descendants would return. You have done what we once failed to do, survive through unity, not domination." The captain felt his throat tighten. Everything they'd fought for, the defense of Earth, the rebellion against alien oppression, the sacrifices of millions, it all came down to this moment. Humanity had been tested not by strength alone, but by endurance and compassion. "Why reveal yourselves now?" he asked quietly. The figure's light dimmed slightly like a soft sigh. "Because the universe has begun to reset. The cycle that ended our time begins again. You have inherited our burden and our hope." A deep tremor shook the ground below. Across the planet's horizon, vast structures began to fold inward, collapsing into streams of energy that spiraled toward the central plane. The fleet's sensors lit up with impossible readings, space itself bending, rewriting. The AI's voice returned, tinged with something almost human. "Dimensional compression detected. The planet is not dying, it's transforming." "Into what?" someone whispered. The light being turned toward the vortex forming below. "Into the bridge," it said. "The connection between what was and what will be. The same bridge we once crossed and lost ourselves in. You must choose whether to close it or step through." The captain stood frozen. The choice felt unbearable. If they closed the bridge, humanity would remain safe but limited, confined to known space. If they crossed, they might find answers, or lose everything. The crew waited for his decision, their faces reflecting the flickering lights of the dying world below. Finally, he looked toward his first officer. "We didn't come all this way just to be afraid of what's next." She nodded silently, tears welling in her eyes. With a deep breath, he gave the command, "Prepare the fleet to cross." Engines flared to life, and the massive ships began to move as one. The vortex widened, revealing a sea of light beyond comprehension. For a brief moment, every human aboard the fleet felt a surge of warmth, like remembering a dream they had long forgotten. They weren't just explorers. They were returning home. As the first ships entered the bridge, a cascade of energy enveloped the fleet. The light being's voice echoed one last time. Remember this. Evolution is not in the stars or the machines, it's in your choices. Then everything went white. When the light faded, the fleet found itself suspended in a void unlike any they had known. There were no stars, no planets, only endless space rippling with faint colors. Their sensors detected fragments of civilizations long gone, drifting like ghosts through the ether. Yet, among them, something new was forming. Structures, worlds, systems, shaped by the energy of the bridge itself. Humanity had not just traveled through space. They had crossed into creation. The captain looked out at the forming horizon. "Are we the only ones here?" he asked softly. The AI replied, "For now. But this place responds to will, to thought. You are no longer bound by the limits of the old universe." The weight of that realization settled over the crew. They had become the architects of a new beginning. Years later, historians would call it the dawn beyond the stars. The bridge world became a new cradle of humanity, a place where colonies rose without the shadows of alien empires or endless wars. The technologies recovered from the bridge reshaped everything: energy, medicine, travel. But more than that, the journey had changed people. They had seen what awaited those who let fear rule, and they chose differently this time. Still, the memory of that first crossing never faded. Veterans of the fleet spoke of the light beings with reverence, calling them the first ones. Others believed they were symbols of what humanity could one day become, a reminder that evolution wasn't about power, but purpose. The captain, now an old man, would often visit the observation deck of the new flagship. He'd watch the stars forming across the void, the light of newborn suns glimmering like scattered hope. He once said to a young cadet, "We thought we were fighting to survive, but what we really fought for was the right to dream again." The cadet didn't fully understand, but she nodded, sensing the truth in his words. Humanity had always been at war, with others, with itself, with the fear of the unknown. But in the end, what defined them wasn't destruction. It was the courage to rebuild, to reach out even when everything seemed lost. And somewhere, deep within the living light of the new universe, a faint whisper echoed through the void. "You chose well." That was the final message the fleet ever received from the first ones. It became a legend, a story told across generations, a reminder that every ending is only the beginning of another journey. Humanity had entered the war zone and wiped their enemies from existence. But in doing so, they discovered something far greater. Not dominance, not conquest, but destiny. And as the new stars continued to burn brighter than ever before, humanity finally understood that their greatest victory was not in war, but in becoming worthy of the universe itself.